Hello, this is Cotton Stoops, and welcome back to another Lumion Legacy HTUC video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about Malevowax, probably the most underwhelming Lumion of this update. However, Malevowax still has a lot of great attributes about it that I think makes it still a viable and pretty good Lumion. Just needs the right meta and of course the right things to go its way in team building and of course in battles. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to use and counter Malevowax. The counters and checks and teammates in order to know how to use Malevowax in your battles, as well as knowing the roles and sets in order to know what to team build around it. Today's video is all about how to use and counter Malevowax. So, in order to know the role of a Lumion, you must look at its base stats and its abilities. Malevowax is no exception of that. Its base stats are relatively rounded, with its range attack stat and its melee attack stat being the outliers. Its range attack stat is 120, which even if it doesn't have a damage boosting ability like the other wall breakers in its power tier, I still think that this can still dish out damage even if it's not invested. So Malevowax is good in that department. Its speed tier of 75, which I will touch upon later, is a decent speed tier. It's nothing too bad to scoff at. And then its energy of 81 can get to 250 pretty easily. However, it will require more investment than other offensive Lumions. Its defensive base stats overall are a little bit on the higher above average spectrum in terms of offensive Lumions, but Malevowax does have this pretty average. It's still pretty good with its HP of 85 and defenses of 95 to be paired with it. Malevowax, utilizing its defensive typing, can be a pretty good solid check to some offensive Lumions that I will talk about later into the video. Its normal abilities and its secret ability are overall pretty lackluster for the most part. They're either pretty inconsistent like Disenchant, or they're pretty mid when it comes to effects. First off, Disenchant does disable enchantments when you swap into the field. However, if enchantments are set up right after you swap out or you're still on the field, you will not be able to remove them. It basically just removes them when you come on the field, and then you can set them if you want again, for at least for the opponent. However, the normal ability Raging Fire does help Malevowax a little bit better. Of course, it already naturally resists fire as a fire spirit type. However, it is a pretty good thing to have an immunity in this game. And of course, you gain energy, which your energy of 81 isn't particularly the best, which means Raging Fire does have some synergy there. However, its secret ability Devious makes it so it can bypass abilities like Devious against Slick Shell Terraclaws. It also works against Thunder Arc Plasmoths, which means that while technically, yes, Raging Fire does seem like the best ability for right now because there are a lot of fire coverage in this game, it really is meta dependent, and when the game progresses and better abilities come along, Devious will probably be put in higher regard. Overall, this Lumion doesn't really seem to be the most well-rounded based off of what its base stats are. Usually you'd want the Lumion to succeed in around 2 areas. However, because of its speed tier, it does outspeed what it needs to in terms of wall breaking, with all the walls being undersped by this Lumion. However, it cannot outspeed a lot of offensive Lumions in this game. This means when paired up with its Fire Spirit defensive typing, which is known to have a lot of resistances and weaknesses, it will be prone to being revenge killed. It also has limited coverage, with its coverage pool not being able to hit light types super effectively for a lot of damage. I'll talk about that later in the set section. However, it does have some useful utilities with its resistances and immunities because of its defensive typing and because of its base stat spread and team synergy. It does support bulky offensive teams. So due to Malevowax's diverse base stat spread, it does have the ability to run multiple sets. So I'll be talking about 2 sets here. Your first ability, in my opinion, it's always going to be Devious. It's the one that helps out offensive the most, and while you can have an ability with Raging Fire to gain an immunity and of course somewhat fix your energy problem, I think that Devious is too good to pass up, especially when you can just try and out-cheese some Plasmoths, which I think it's pretty decent. However, Raging Fire is there if you don't want to waste time. Personality is going to be very smart, frail, tender, so we can minimize as much damage as we're going to take. You already have good melee matchups against Tatab and Hunter, so you shouldn't be worried about that too much, and you're very smart, so you will be doing as much damage as possible. Moveset here is just going to be our collection of coverage moves. Rant is just so we can hit Luminami and Koyone super effectively. Fun fact, if the Luminami is not clever, you will be able to 2-hit KO them, which is very good and can help scout sets. And the Gamma Pulse, Phantom Blast, Flare Blast, they're just your 3 other moves that are either coverage moves or they're your stats. And your item is obviously going to be the specialty goggles, and the set here is going to utilize your 28 energy for 240 energy, so you can use 4 of your Phantom or Flare Blasts. Your range attack of 200 and 200 speed is just to max out your more important stats. You want to see outspeed as much as possible, especially when you got limits like Mutagon and Valkyrie in your speed tier. And then your HP of 72, well, just our leftovers, it's really not that deep. Now, while the first set focused on damage, the second set will focus on defensive utility while still having some offensive prowess. Now, the second ability, Raging Fire, is of course on more demand here. You will be utilizing your defensive typing to swap in more, so you might as well have the defensive ability. However, Devious is, in my opinion, still the better option. In terms of personalities, Robust Smart will allow you to take hits from Tatab and Hunter much more better, and stuff that Sober's Krakaloa will normally wall. Just think of those Lumians and then you're set. Stuff would be Monkey Madness, Baniki, which admittedly they might be running Scrappy, but it really depends. You just have to scout for that. And then your personality will be very frail to minimize the amount of damage you will be doing. Very frail if you're not using your melee attack. Your moveset will be Scapegoat, Peace of Mind, Flare Blast, and Rant. Rant is obviously to hit Luminamis. Now, of course, you can run your Phantom Blast. However, Rant does help you hit the type you are gonna get walled by, and right now we are in the middle of a transition stage, so the moveset might change in terms of what is common in the meta, but it's generally safe to have a strong coverage move and then have something that of course aligns with your stab. Scapegoat and Peace of Mind will allow you to do some health amulet shenanigans while giving you the ability to set up in front of something to take damage for you, and then this will of course require you to run the health amulet. If you do not have an option for this, running the Rageful Plushie, especially for your defensive typing, since you get hit by so many things super effectively, it's a good item to run, and in which case I would replace Scapegoat for Phantom Blast, because you'd really need that extra damage, because Scapegoat wouldn't really help you too much there. And of course the TPs. This is going to be a lot more, I guess complicated is a decent way of putting it, but I'm just going to go try and say it anyway. The 128 speed, which admittedly seems weird when you're running a more defensive set, will be able to outspeed 176 very brawny Boroks, which are more common than what you think, because obviously there are speed tiers around Borok that Borok doesn't really need to outspeed at that point. And then the 28 energy carries over from the Spec goggle set, and 192 HP and 48 melee defense allows you to get 3-shotted by Tatab's Timber Thrashes when they are very brawny and specialty gloves, and then Hunter won't be able to break your Scapegoat. This means that you effectively wall Hunter with Health Amulet, and then you do a lot better against Tatab. And of course, you'll live a Brawny Arceus at full HP when it's using Outburst. This set also can 1v1 Luminami, however, it is a little bit more susceptible, and honestly, I'd rather give that to a teammate. However, if Luminami is chipped and you do find the opportunity to break it, then just go ahead. And of course, 104 range attack are the leftovers, because we don't really have anywhere else to put this. So finally, off to offensive and defensive counters and checks for this Lumion. Obviously, Malevowax is pretty easy to check and counter, because light types are going to be the end of the game here, and that will be a pretty prevalent theme. Stuff like Chienta and other light types, which I'll talk about later in a dedicated one, are of course going to be your better options. However, even if specialty goggles, you're going to be fighting those stuff like Zulong, Vocaloa, and Arceros are going to be able to do pretty well against them. You can only swap in once or twice in the rant, however, they can then 2-hit KO it. It's really not that hard. You will, however, need to scout whether or not this is a rageable plushie, because I know people will try and utilize that because its defensive typing has a lot of stuff weak. So you will have to scout that, and of course it's not really that hard. You just need to have a slap down or identify the set quickly through damage calcs and of course counting the damage it's doing to you. The light types, of course, are going to be Eclipse and Enchanted Coat Jalusa. Jalusa can also opt to run Incandescent now that, of course, the meta has going to be more offense than not, in my opinion. So you can run these two, and then of course the defensive stops. In Phoenix, you Typhoon and Luminami. Luminami, like I said, the Spec goggles does have the ability to 2-hit KO Luminami. However, if Luminami is clever and you're still reeling in from the Magmadire flashbacks, the same Luminami from those will be able to stop Malevowax. And then you Typhoon and Infernix, they're just hard walls. You Typhoon can just beat it eventually with Aqua Jaw spam, and then Infernix can peace of mind along with it. It has Draco Beam, so you're gonna be having a fun time with that. And of course, defensive cores. Now admittedly, it's really hard for me to recommend a defensive core without mentioning meta. However, because we are in a transition stage, it is a bit more difficult to really not to. Totab and Malevowax is a very good duo in of itself because Totab, it doesn't really like your snack, Obsidian, Tundulin, or not Tundulin, but mainly those two. And of course, Malevowax has the ability to swap in on them and either hit them super effectively or just 2-hit KO them outright. Other stuff like Billforge, Malevowax can take advantage of, and we'll just have to watch out for the earth coverage. And then having a choice of a light type is also pretty nice because usually Totab does like to pair itself well with light types because light types can take advantage of your snack and Obsidian. And Jalusa here also does a pretty good job at baiting in the water types that Totab can deal with and the plant types that Malevowax can deal with. So it's a pretty good core. Of course, fire, water, plant core, it's really obvious. But Chienta is also another option. It's kind of a more offensive based teammate than Jalusa would have because obviously it's lower. And Chienta, although having similar walls to Totab, also has the ability to set up late game with Brawn Boost and of course dish amounts a lot of damage when needs to. So at least in my opinion, I think Malevowax does have the potential. However, it's really all dependent on how the meta shapes. Of course, Luminami is going to be playing a big role on how well Malevowax is used. And this also goes for other light types like Enchanted Coat Jalusa, and stuff like Chienta and all of that. Of course, the speed tier is holding it down, so it's not like it's per se Lumien's holding it down from being good. It really just depends on how well the meta shapes. Of course, the meta is going to be a lot more offensive than it was than the pretty much the centralizing core 3 of Lumien's being used all the time. However, I think that potentially Malevowax has potential. It really just depends on how the meta shapes out. And of course, we are still, about 2 weeks into the new Lumiens being added. We haven't seen the text that top players have found out, and we haven't really seen the meta really progress. So anything can happen in my opinion. However, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and see more. Join the Discord, and of course, as always, remember that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.